I discovered the most disturbing secrets hidden in Canada's haunted wilderness. I never should have opened that door. It felt wrong, like my gut was screaming at me to keep my hands to myself. But curiosity got the better of me. I was just an ordinary guy, enjoying my usual weekend hike through the thick pines. The sun filtered softly through the leaves, warming my skin. Birds chirped overhead, weaving a serene soundtrack for my thoughts. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. A gust of cold wind swept through, sending chills racing down my spine. I shivered and trudged on, the forest suddenly feeling heavier, the shadows darker. What's that? I glanced around. The sounds of nature muffled. An eerie silence blanketed the area. My heart pounded. I paused. Then, I heard it, a low whisper, barely above the rustle of leaves. My fingers tightened around my water bottle. I shook my head, forcing myself forward, but every step felt like I was moving through molasses. As I ventured deeper, I spotted something out of place. A discarded relic of the past, an old, rusted sign half buried in moss. "Keep out Wildlife Research Area." My stomach sank. No. I didn't want to be here, but a strange pull urged me onward. It was as if something wanted me to see, to know. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. I froze, heart racing. "Hello?" I called, but my voice quaked. Silence returned, thick. Then, a flicker in my peripheral vision, shadows darting like whispers against the trees. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the ominous quiet. The air felt electric, heavy with anticipation. I pushed further, consumed by dread yet unable to turn back. More rusted signs appeared, warning after warning, all painting a picture of something sinister deep in the woods. My instincts screamed at me, yet I felt bold, perhaps foolish. What secrets had been hidden here? What tales left to tell? Then, a distant howl echoed through the trees. Not a wolf. Something greater. My breath hitched. A shiver crawled up my spine. I was not alone. Panic clawed at my chest. I chased the sound, my feet betraying me. I needed answers. Everything seemed to conspire against me. Branches closed in overhead, twisting like fingers reaching for my throat. I stumbled into a clearing. And there it was, the door, ancient and foreboding, nestled in the earth. A doorway to nowhere. My heart raced uncontrollably. As I reached out to touch the cold metal handle, I felt a presence behind me. My breath seized in my throat. I spun around. There it stood, a shadowy figure, dark against the dim light filtering through the thicket. I opened my mouth to scream, but silence swallowed me whole. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadowy figure remained motionless, an oppressive presence coiling around me like thick fog, suffocating and foreboding. Its shape was indistinct, as if it were both there and not there, flickering at the edges of perception. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the eerie silence that clung to the trees surrounding me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was paralyzed by an instinctual fear that begged me to run but rendered me immobile. Then, as if drawn by my terror, the figure stepped closer. My eyes strained to make sense of it. I felt hope waver. What if it was merely a trick of the light? Some strange convergence of shadows? A lone deer perhaps, or the twisted remains of a tree. But then, it spoke. Low, gravelly, like the sound of roots snaking through the earth, turn back, you shouldn't have come." The air grew colder still, sharp enough to slice through the layers of my jacket. My breath emerged as white puffs, the cold both inside and outside now tangible. Something deep in my gut snapped. I stumbled backward against the door that had beckoned me. Its cold metal handle pressed into my palm, somehow comforting yet horrifying at once. I was aware now more than ever of that insidious drumming in the ground below, a pulse that quickened, an invitation to a dance I could not escape. The figure continued to advance, its footfalls quiet yet heavy. My heart raced, but my feet remained anchored as if fused to the earth. I know I should have fled. I could have hurtled through the underbrush, tearing back the way I came, but fear bound me tighter than cords of iron, and then the whispers began, more than a single voice, a chorus of hissing breaths brushing past my ears. "Find us, join us," they called, scraping the edges of my sanity like slick fingers against a gaping wound. My mind wrestled with the commands, the dreadful command to dig deeper into the mystery that lay behind the door, to pry it open and step beyond. The shadow drew closer still, and I caught a flickering glimpse of it, bones laid bare beneath thin skin, its eyes a churning mass of dark liquid and malice. I could feel its intent like a long, winding hook in the pit of my stomach to lure me, to unravel me. In that moment, I understood that whatever lay behind the door was not meant for the living. With a sudden surge of primal clarity, I yanked the handle, wrenching open the door just as the figure reached for me. The blackness yawned before me, an abyss that promised more than I could fathom, secrets long buried, truths that could warp reality itself. I hesitated, staring into the depths, barely a breath away from the grip of this shadow, but what heartfelt horror awaited me? What beasts lay waiting on the other side? As the figure lunged, I grasped my fate and jumped forward. An unseen force yanked me into the darkness, the last vestiges of light flickering behind me like the final gasp of a dying flame. I fell into the void, plunging into an echoing abyss, swallowed whole by whispers that grew louder and more urgent. Just before the darkness consumed me entirely, I heard it, the howling once more, closer this time, echoing through the almost tangible void. "All who seek are welcome." Then it hit like a crash of thunder, a bone-rattling image of twisted passages, memories not my own flooding my mind, a cacophony of fear mingling with ancient cries. I plummeted, unmoored from reality, drawn toward the heart of unspeakable, vile secrets. And then darkness. Just then, I found myself back in the clearing, a gaggle of souls around me. Faces contorted in agony, anger, hope, but one recognizable one stood in the center, mouth twisted in a silent scream. My own reflection stared back at me, yet distorted, hollowed out and desperate. With dawning horror, I realized they were not just memories. They were guiding me, pulling me deep into the wild unknown, where something more than fear awaited. Still trapped within this pulsating truth, this horrific revelation, I heard the echoes of my heartbeat intertwining with their cries, tempered on the edge of sanity. And then there was stillness once more. The clearing, now a maw of ghosts. With a ragged breath, I understood one terrifying truth: I was no longer just a seeker but an offering. "Where is my way home?" I gasped just as another figure emerged from the darkness, reaching for me with fingers that glinted like knives. "Home is where you are wanted," it crooned, its voice dripping with malevolence, "and you're going to stay." Before I could respond, a blinding light burst from the doorway, illuminating the clearing and the tortured faces, freezing them in horror, and my blood turned to ice. The scream escaped me, a haunting echo swallowed by the shadows that consumed the forest. All I could think was, I opened the door, but what I stepped into was far worse than I ever imagined. As the ground shifted and the air thickened, a question lingered: was there any way back now? The brightness engulfed me, a sharp contrast to the encroaching darkness I'd just escaped. But it was deceiving. The light didn't warm me, it repulsed me. It rendered details in stark, punitive clarity. The faces around me twisted in grotesque agony, luminous yet shrouded in shadows, hovering at the fringes of the brightness. Their eyes, lifeless pools of torment, fixated on me with a fervor that sent jolts of despair rippling through my core. They beckoned with muted cries, fluid hands reaching out, and for a moment, I thought I could discern a semblance of words: "Help us, free us," but an unseen force compelled me backward, drawing me away from their despair. I was both a spectator and a pariah, forever outside their reach. It was clear they were trapped, and their anguish tugged on my heart like a broken anchor attempting to settle into the icy depths of a sunken vessel. "Stay with us," the figure with the glinting fingers whispered again, its face still obscured, shadowy tendrils weaving around its form. "You're part of us now. Can't you feel it?" There was a magnetism to its voice, enticing yet filled with creeping dread. I shook my head violently, trying to deny the truth that threatened to take root in my mind. I felt the unrelenting pull of the clearing, a siren song that promised liberation if only I would surrender. Desperation clawed at me, the instincts of survival battling against this burgeoning bond that felt alive, pulsing like the heart of the forest itself. As I struggled against the tide, the ground beneath crumbled, revealing an expanse of darkness below. More of that void I'd narrowly escaped. My breath quickened as the tendrils of fear twisted tighter around my throat, a noose woven of whispers and strident warnings. "You are wanted." Needed. Then, seemingly from nowhere, they emerged, shapes shuffling forth from the deep forest shadows, new silhouettes, stringy limbs, and hollow eyes, forming a chaotic halo around me. They flickered in and out of existence, all at once pulling me toward the edge of the clearing and dragging me back. I felt torn, like a leaf caught in the currents of fate, flailing helplessly between life and the abyss. "Home is where you are wanted," I had heard before, echoed between a labyrinth of syllables and despair. But what did that really mean? Where was this home? Fear gripped me like icy fingers, whispering that the answer was too close, too visceral to comprehend. Suddenly, the chorus rose again, drowning out the last threads of reason. "Join us," they chanted, their voices overlapping in a dissonant symphony that morphed into a mournful wail. "You were chosen." In that moment of anguish, I caught sight of a single tear streaking down the cheek of one of the muted souls, falling to the ground with a soft thud that echoed a human sound entangled with an inhuman fate. "Please," I pleaded, my voice warped by the weight of their collective sorrow. "Please, tell me how to escape this." But instead of words, vision flooded back upon me. Whirlwinds of grotesque memories spiraled into focus. The dark landscape rushed forward, revealing splintered trees and gnarled limbs twisted like tortured souls, sharp jagged rocks covered in glistening moss that seemed to pulse with a malevolent life. I was trapped in their nightmare once again, relentlessly replaying my escape back into this twisted reality. The brightness splintered, fracturing around me as a cacophony of day and night merged, enveloping the figures that haunted me. Just then, a horrified realization sank into my bones. The space I was in was neither solid nor shifting. It was a liminal realm where the boundaries of life and death blurred, a threshold of despair crying out for new souls to fill the vacant spaces. Then, a chilling sound emerged, cutting through the tumult. A single, sharp snap. An enormous shadow burst forth, fangs bared, a creature born from the darkest depths of the forest. It surged into the clearing among the spirits, eyes glowing with predatory hunger. "Let her go." It roared, its breath an icy gale that swept through the souls surrounding me, who vanished into mist, their faces etched with hopelessness. But as it advanced, the figure with glinting fingers stepped forward, brandishing its own darkness. "She belongs to us now. You cannot take her." The air thickened with tension as two forces clashed within the clearing. And as I stood frozen between them, a sickening thought gnawed at my mind. What if the fight for my soul had already begun? What if escape would lead me to an existence far worse than being an offering? As their reckless struggle continued, chaos erupted around me, screeches and roars melded into indistinct horror. The ground shook violently, fissures snaking across the landscape, pulling me toward the gaping maw of the void. "Your choice is but an illusion," the dark figure hissed, its eyes narrowing on me with flaring malice. My heart thundered in my chest, both eager and terrified. With the earth beneath me shifting like quicksand, I caught a glimpse of the once living souls swirling away into darkness, a truth dawning that chilled my very marrow. I had opened one door, but was I ever meant to escape? Just as the abyss stretched wide again, black tendrils snatched at my ankles. I gasped, two masses fighting violently around me. And then, a voice broke through the din, one that sent shudders down my spine. "Join us, or face the darkness alone." And then, with a final tug that severed all remnants of safety, I fell. I felt the void consume me, liquid darkness swallowing my screams, dragging me down into an abyss from which there was no return. It felt as though all the air had been siphoned from my lungs, and the cold seeped into my bones. My fall was eternal, disorienting, a descent through layers of dread that crashed against the walls of my sanity. Finally, I hit something solid, a ground less like earth and more like a pulsating mass of roiling shadows. The impact sent ripples of nauseating energy through me, awakening the primal instinct to flee. But when I looked around, I was not alone. Figures twisted out of the darkness, wearing the familiar pain-streaked faces of the souls from the clearing. Their mouths moved, forming words that were swallowed whole by the deep silence around us. Curiosity, that treacherous flame, burned within me. I sought their eyes for answers, for salvation, but the deeper I looked, the more it was clear, they were no longer alive. They were echoes of anguish, harbingers from a reality that had become hell. Run, one of them rasped, its voice a brittle whisper that twisted like smoke through the air. You can still escape, but escape where? My thoughts tangled, a frantic wrestle to make sense of this new reality. As I took a step, I could feel the ground pulse beneath my feet, alive, aware, and hungry. Tendrils of shadow reached up as if to caress my legs, their cool touch both tempting and repulsive. Don't touch it. Another spirit cried, clawing at the air. It'll claim you. The frantic warning barely made it through before tendrils slithered around my ankles, pulling me toward the writhing mass beneath. I stumbled, fighting against the malevolent grip, panic igniting my reflexes. My gasps echoed back, distorted cries ricocheting against the walls of this oppressive darkness. I twisted and clawed at the air, but it only pulled tighter, sinking deeper into the dark heart beneath. Suddenly, the grotesque figures began to shift, their faces merging and splitting, as if they weren't merely ghosts but fragments of something far more sinister, a singular entity, a will enshrined in agony, gathering strength from my panic. Feed it! They cried, voices overlapping, eerie and hollow. It thrives on despair. My heartbeat quickened, realizing with horror that every ounce of terror fed their darkness, fed the creature lurking at the core of this space. Instincts flared in me, an urge to deny them my fear. I stumbled back, resisting the pull, and against all odds, began to break free. Help! I screamed, a raw desperation tearing from my throat, but instead of a response, the shadows recoiled, seeming to hiss at my defiance. In that moment, I could have sworn I saw something in the darkness shift, a flicker that wasn't a shadow but rather a new horror lurking just out of sight. Stop resisting. A voice boomed from the depths, deep and rumbling like the tremors of a mountain collapsing. The ground quaked once more, and from it, huge arms of shadow erupted, grasping at my arms and legs, pulling me toward an encroaching maw of endless nothingness, a swirling vortex where sanity dared not tread. With a surge of adrenaline, I ripped free from the barricading darkness and launched myself forward, tumbling over the uneven surface of this new plane. Behind me, the shadows screamed, their cries intersecting with an undercurrent of laughter met with deafening silence. I wouldn't look back, I couldn't. I barreled through a dense fog that trailed from the shadows, the air thickening with every breath I took. It stung, a bitter cloud of despair. Just when I thought I'd escaped the darkness, the ground erupted beneath me, sending me tumbling again into a cavern steeped in fetid air where walls pulsated, slick and glistening with some unnameable horror. Above, ethereal whispers flooded from the crevices, wrapping around me like chains. Stay, you are one of us. You can never leave. I pressed against the slick walls, clawing for purchase as panic enveloped me like an embrace. And that's when I saw at the heart of this place, pulsing in the center of the cavern, was a grotesque, writhing mass, a confluence of all the tortured souls that had become a part of it. Bodies entwined with one another, faces forever frozen in pain, nestled into the flesh of the entity that was both a prison and a king. The realization hit me like a fist to the gut. This was their home, their prison, and if I was to be claimed, this was what awaited me. The laughter intensified around me, the shadowy figures bantering about my fate, and just as I prepared to make my final stand against the inescapable despair, the pulsing mass began to crack open, revealing a gaping mouth that beckoned me in with a hypnotic, beckoning glow that I was being drawn toward it, pulled into its maw as my mind was flooded with visions of sacrifice and despair, each one a reminder of what I would leave behind and what I would become if I succumbed. "Join us!" the voices cried as the shadows pulled tighter, rushing to bring me into the swirling depths of the dark heart. With one last flicker of hope, I lunged back, striving to resist the inexorable pull, but as the shadows morphed into claws, my heart sank. "My soul is not theirs to take," I bellowed defiantly, only for a strong tearing sensation to explode from within me. But just as I felt the warmth of rebellion flickering, an icy tendril wound its way around my throat, constricting the defiance from my lips, tightening until all that was left was a chilling whisper from the heart of darkness, echoing through me, "Welcome home." In that moment, the crawling shadows surged, dragging me downward, and the world above simply vanished. I was plunged into darkness once more, surrounded by the forgotten, lost souls in a place where light dared not penetrate into the unfathomable depths of their eternal torment. The depths of the darkness were a cacophony of whispers, each voice melding into the next. I could no longer discern where one soul ended and another began. They swarmed around me like moths to a flame, murmuring their tales of demise and despair, weaving a tapestry of despair that threatened to suffocate me. "Do you hear them?" one voice hissed, its tone dripping with malice. "They are trapped, just like you will be. Forever." I turned, frantically searching for the source, but it was an all-encompassing fog, blocking every semblance of light or direction. The weight of their agony pressed down on me, paralyzing my thoughts, a floodgate of terror threatening to drown me in the memories of all they had once been, parents, children, friends, all lost to the insatiable void that surrounded us. Wresting control of my breathing, I closed my eyes, focusing on the steady thrum of my own heartbeat. I needed to find a foothold in this insanity. "I am not afraid," I shouted defiantly, but even as I spoke the words, doubt gnawed at my resolve. At once, the laughter shifted. It transformed from sinister to a dark, mockingly amused tone, as if the shadows recognized my struggle and reveled in it. "You think you can escape?" another voice said, this one colder, sharper. "Foolish child. You belong to the dark now." That I staggered back, knocking against a slick surface. The walls of this cavern felt alive, pulsing under my fingers, and I could feel the heavy breath of the mass behind me, a sentient weight that threatened to consume me whole. Yet something inside me flickered a refusal to yield. "Bring her." I heard the entity command, its voice echoing like thunder through the cavern. The shadows surged toward me, a tidal wave of limbs and grips that blended reality and nightmare into one fluid form. Suddenly, tendrils were everywhere, coiling around my wrist, my ankles, snaking across my skin. I writhed against their grasp, desperate to free myself, but the shadows only pulled tighter. They began to drag me toward the pulsing heart of the entity, closer toward that gaping mouth, its insatiable hunger beckoning me forward. "Join us," they cried, a chorus of torment filling the air. I felt the abyss open beneath me, a churning storm of despair edged with longing. Memories that did not belong to me flooded my mind, a small boy crying for his mother, a woman whispering promises she could never keep. Each memory was a hook, trying to reel me into the malignancy that awaited. Desperation clawed at the corners of my sanity as I attempted to scream, a blood-curdling cry that choked me. "You don't own me," I yelled, drawing strength from the very fear they sought to harness. I pushed against the encroaching shadows, the weight of lost souls pressing in around me like a vice. As if feeling my defiance, the shadows recoiled momentarily, creating a brief opening. Seizing the chance, I lunged toward the slick cave walls. I couldn't see what lay beyond, but the pulse of something anything other than the darkness drove me. My fingers clawed against the surface, seeking any crevice, any escape, but then, a piercing laughter erupted around me, shattering the brief silence. "Pathetic!" the creature bellowed, the walls quaking with its rage. Tendrils surged back with renewed vigor, overwhelming me, engulfing my limbs. "You can never escape." With a sudden jolt, the entity began to pull me backwards, and I was rushing toward the gaping mouth, swirling with shadows, where I would cease to exist as I would become just another whisper among the tortured souls. Just as I felt my legs lift from the ground, gravity refusing to hold me in the face of its insatiable hunger, a sudden shift grew in the air. A spark of realization ignited within my chaotic mind. If I join you, I can destroy you. I shouted, each word spilling from my lips like molten fire. The shadows wavered, hesitant for the briefest moment, unsure of my intentions. I pressed the advantage, rhetoric born from the deepest fear. I will become the very thing you fear, a trap for your darkness, a shining light that reveals your secrets. In that moment of hesitation, the cacophony of lost souls halted, the shimmering glow of fear ripping through the mist that enveloped me. Just as hope surged within me, I felt an excruciating tremor slice through the caverns, a mix of fury and longing from the pulsing mass. And then, with a ferocious snarl, the horrifying mouth of the void opened wider, a radiant abyss that cracked open the very fabric of reality, a portal beckoning me with promises of power. The shadows lashed out, yanking me toward it, their intent more urgent than ever. You will not leave. A rupture of energy exploded around me, and I teetered on the brink of darkness. Time slowed as I was caught in the throes of their anger and despair, the visceral energy pulling me further to the edge where salvation could be within reach or eternal damnation awaited. On the cusp of celestial annihilation, I clenched my fists, preparing to leap into a fate far worse than death, a voice piercing through the bedlam. Embrace what you truly are, and with that, the ground beneath me shattered, sending fragments of fractured light spiraling into the swirling abyss, leaving me suspended in a realm between shadows and possibility. The world exploded into chaos around me, shards of light mixing with darkness as I hovered on the edge of creation and destruction. The cacophony of the shadows receded for a heartbeat, and in that breathless pause, I heard the last echo of a memory woven into the fabric of the void. A child's laughter rang out, pure and untainted, contrasting sharply with the grotesque anguish that haunted every corner of this abyss. Help me. The laughter twisted into a plea, a voice both familiar and foreign. It drew close, weaving through the shadows like a silver thread against a canvas of darkness. Don't leave me here. The urgency stirred something deep within me, a visceral tug that panged with grief. As the darkness churned around me, it became clear, these souls, these shards of memories, their despair was not simply a byproduct of this void, but a grotesque reminder of lives lost, hopes shattered. An awakening flickered within my chest, igniting fears I had long buried. Driven by instinct, I fought against the pull of the void, using the anguish of my own heart like a weapon. I won't abandon you. I shouted to the shadows, feeling their collective rage, their hopes for redemption shrouded in desperation. I will break you, the entity growled in response, tendrils of shadow thrusting toward me with a ferocious zeal, seeking to reclaim their prize. You think you understand our pain? It sneered. You will never. But its barbed words dissolved as I let loose a primal scream, a surge of reckoning that pulsed from the depths of my being. The shimmering threads of light exploded from my form as I thrust myself forward, each cry an invocation of forgotten strength. I am stronger than this darkness. The void recoiled, the gaping maw narrowing, spewing forth clumps of anguish-laden phantoms, a tempest of souls restless in their plight, each one reaching, grasping, their spectral forms flickering like dying flame. In an instant, their howls morphed into a pleading symphony, a myriad of voices beckoning from the shadows. Free us! Panic surged through my veins as the memories of faces long gone began to fill my mind, their eyes hollow, their cries echoing in unison. I saw a young girl, tangled in vines of shadow, those once bright eyes begging for salvation. Beside her, an old man long forgotten, a patina of dust covering the remnants of his dignity, reaching out as if sensing a beacon of hope amid the void's chilling grasp. So many familiar faces entwined with the fabric of my fear and failure. The knowledge hit me like a gale force, recognizing that each lost soul was a piece of my own heart scattered into the depths. Would I choose to embrace the shadows or lead them into the light? Desperation clawed at me, urging action. Join me, if you dare. I screamed into the writhing mass, feeling the shadows momentarily halt, their fury stifled by an unexpected hesitance. You are not alone in this. I will fight for you. But then the laughter echoed cold and malevolent. You think they'll follow you? They belong to us. The shadows surged, a swirling torrent of wrath that clawed at my skin, the coldness settling in my bones, trying to isolate me from the strength of the souls surrounding me. Taking a leap of faith, I thrust out my hand, feeling warmth pulse through my fingertips. I could sense the flickering threads of light stretching from my form, wrapping around the souls caught in the torment. With each flash of illumination, I felt their fear dissolve, transforming into resolute strength. Embrace your fury, I shouted, calling upon the glimmers of hope within their hearts. Let it light the way. We will rise. The spirit stirred, igniting in that energy, their lost fragments coalescing around me. They surged forward, colliding with the shadows, each collision sending shockwaves of illumination cascading through the darkness. An immense roar erupted, a hurricane of rage and defiance as the realms quaked around us, but just when it seemed the tide had turned, a heavy silence descended ominously, punctuated only by a low growl that echoed through the void. You think this rebellion will take hold? You are playing a game you cannot win. And from the heart of that darkness, a visage materialized, a figure cloaked in the swirling shadows, its gaze boring into mine. No longer an abstraction, but a haunting silhouette of malice, all rage and despair intricately woven into a single form. It leaned forward, revealing a grin that was both horrifyingly human and grotesquely distorted. We are so much more than your trifling memories. We are ancient. We are eternal. Just as my heart plummeted into despair, darkness surged once more, crashing toward me like an avalanche determined to crush any flicker of hope. Bracing against the torrent, I felt my grip on the souls begin to falter as they were torn from the growing shadows, pulled apart like bread before a feast. No. I screamed, the futility of my fight thickening the air with despair. The shadows crashed into me, each tendril seeping into my skin, deeper and deeper, a dark communion that promised eternal damnation. But even as I felt my resolve shattering, a single thought cleaved through the swirling chaos. This isn't the end. The ground trembled beneath me as I was swept away, swallowed by the maw of the void, into an everlasting darkness, the echoes of lost souls swirling within me, and memories I could not comprehend pulling me into oblivion. And then, amidst the turmoil and despair, a new presence stirred within, mesomething wild and primal that whispered against the encroaching dread. Awakened I, and the heartbeat before darkness swallowed me whole, I caught a glimpse of an insidious light flickering within the depths, a prelude to something yet unimagined, a glimmer that promised to change everything. Awaken, the voice implored again, and as the abyss fell into silence, I began to understand the truth lurking just beyond my reach. And then, a screamy scream was ripped from my fractured soul, echoing in the depths of the night as I was cast into the darkness, suspended on the precipice between the light of the living and the infinitely more sinister embrace of the hooded figure welcoming me home. The void had transformed into a thick mist, swirling like a malevolent wraith that constricted around my body. Every breath felt heavy with the weight of despair, and a low, resonating hum vibrated through my very core, a pulse that matched the rhythm of my own frightened heartbeat. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, teasing me with grotesque sun-formed figures twisted into impossible shapes, their dark whispers curling around the remnants of my sanity. Awaken, the voice beckoned, the urgency igniting a flicker of defiance within me that battled against the oppressive despair. I felt the remnants of departed souls clawing for recognition, a mournful chorus of moans weaving through the mist. Each spirit's agony pressed against my chest, demanding acknowledgement. Release us. They cried out in unison, their sorrow reverberating within the vast emptiness. I could almost feel their icy fingers brushing against my skin, urging me to act. Then, abruptly, the shadows shifted, coalescing at the edge of my sight, forming shapes that resembled long-forgotten memories. I instinctively staggered back, my heart racing as I fought against the urge to flee. One spirit stepped forward, a fragile woman shrouded in filmy darkness, her face a haunting blend of recognition and despair. The intensity of her gaze penetrated the fog that threatened to envelop my senses. Please, she whispered, her voice layered with echoes. You're the key. You must face them, or we will never find peace. My instinct screamed that I should run, but the intensity of her need pierced through my fear. I steeled myself and stepped closer. What do you want me to do? her eyes shifted, and she extended her hand, revealing a silver locket that dangled from her fingers, shimmering with an unearthly light. "The shadows feed on your memories," she murmured, the weight of her sorrow pulling at my heart. "Remember what you've lost. Find the truth beneath the darkness." As she spoke, the shadows lunged, tendrils reaching out to ensnare me, promising eternal forgetfulness in their shadowy embrace. The mere thought of surrendering to them sent a surge of panic coursing through me. This was no longer just a battle between light and darkness, it was a reckoning against my own fears. In a desperate grasp, I snatched the locket from her hand. Its surface pulsed warm against my skin as an uplifting energy cascaded through my images scattered like shards of glass, memories tumbling forth like reflections from a shattered mirror. All at once, I was bombarded with glimpses of a life I had long forgotten, laughter in the park, a warm embrace from someone I had lost, the tender gaze of a child whose face I desperately longed to remember. "Focus," the woman urged, her voice intensifying as shadows writhed closer, hissing and thrumming like hungry beasts. "They are here. You must confront them." As I concentrated on the locket, it began to hum a resonant frequency that intertwined with the throbbing pulse of the void itself. I clasped it tight, feeling its warmth anchor me. The chaotic screams of the souls around me transformed into a singular entity, echoing my own woes, intertwining our fates together. With an echoed cry, I pushed through the crushing shadows, thrusting my will against the tide of despair. The void lurched violently, the shadows recoiling as if scorched by an unseen light. The locket flared with brilliance, illuminating the ghastly figures that writhed at the edges of my consciousness. "Show me!" I shouted, despair and determination rallying within me, demanding clarity amid chaos. The shadows quivered, their sinister forms vibrating with rage and fear. "You think you can," the voice of the cloaked figure scraped through the air like shards of glass, but it was silenced by the locket's power. My memories twisted like vines, constricting around the darkness, creating fissures of light that spread outward. A cacophony of anguished cries erupted, drowning out everything as long-buried secrets clawed their way to the surface. Flashes of the past illuminated the Shadowsa child's laughter fading into sobs, a graveyard overgrown with thorns, the faint smell of decay mingled with poppies and rain. And beneath it all, the figure of the woman, her silhouette blending with the memories, pleading with me. "Face it," she urged. This is where it began. The shadows convulsed violently, writhing around me as I forced my eyes to meet the hooded figure, its eyes burning like suns amidst the encroaching darkness. I felt my defiance churning within me, a raw and powerful surge. "I will find the truth. I will break this cycle." Just then, a screech pierced the veil of silence, as sharp and piercing as the crack of thunder. An abyss of darkness roared back to life, displacing the light from the locket in an explosion of shadow. The horror twisted in impossibly elaborate ways, 1,000 voices uttering my name, and then suddenly a forgotten face emerged from the chaos, grinning with twisted glee. "Welcome back," it said. My own voice, echoed with taunting familiarity. The shadows trembled at the sound, absorbing the brilliance of the locket until it dimmed to a mere ember. From my very depths, despair coalesced painfully, and the memories slipped from my grasp, unraveling like fine thread in the wind. Darkness surged forward with renewed vigor, drowning me beneath an all-encompassing tide. I felt my senses slipping away, the warmth of the locket, the woman's eyes, the cries for salvation, and just as everything began to suffocate beneath the weight of shadows, the last flicker of light whispered through the silence. "Awaken." The locket shattered against the ground, scattering shards of memories into the void, igniting a flare of pure white light. I gasped, no longer dulled by despair, but ready to confront the reality lurking underneath the shadows. And then I remembered, the woman, the locked-away memories, the truth buried deep within the wilderness. "Where are you?" I cried, my voice fracturing the veil, searching for clarity. "I won't leave you again," but in answer, the darkness surged. A cold breeze swept through the void, a terrible stillness that settled on my shoulders like an unbearable weight. As I froze in realization, I could feel the whispers around me slide into a sinister chant, a song of malice promising the awakening of something far more dreadful. "Awaken. Awaken, I was suddenly aware that I wasn't alone. Pulsating shadows gathered behind me, a grove of distorted shapes rising with a thirst for vengeance. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my gut, realizing too late as their monstrous forms intruded upon my vision. "Join us!" they cried in unison, voices echoing with unrestrained joy, and I could feel the void closing in around me. No. I screamed, resisting with every ounce of strength as the shadows surged forward, fingers stretching to grasp at my soul, and then everything went dark. The silence that enveloped me was profound, a deafening absence of sound that clawed at my nerves. I felt as if I had been stripped bare, exposed to the very essence of fear lurking at the edges of my consciousness. No longer held by the weight of shadows or the piercing light of the locket, I floated within a hollowed vortex that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. "Join us!" echoed around me, the seductive tone drawing me into the chilling embrace of despair. I focused on the remnants of the woman's pleadings. Her voice became an anchor, pulling me through the abyss like a lifeline. Yet, the overwhelming darkness whispered insidiously in return, promising secrets of the wilderness that would unravel my sanity. Suddenly, a ghastly figure loomed ahead, taking form as the mists coalesced into a twisted visage. A child, no more than 8, emerged in a burst of shadow, a ghoul-like reflection of innocence lost. Eyes as black as the void stared back, layered with sadness and an unquenchable rage. "Why did you leave me?" it croaked, its voice a piercing blade that pierced through the haunting silence. Who are you?" I managed, my throat dry as the chill wrapped around my heart like a vice. "That I am your nightmare," it whispered, its smile wide yet grotesque, distorting the features that had once promised love. "You think you can remember? You didn't protect me. You let them take me." Chilling apprehension seeped through my veins, recognizing the echo of my past surfacing in this abominable form. It was a reflection of my guilt, my failure. "Please," I whispered, a part of me trying to connect with the remnant that had morphed into this creature. "I never wanted." What?" it screamed, unfurling its arms as shadows began to spill forth from its fingertips. "You didn't want to be haunted. You didn't want the truth. You buried it deep, and now we'll awaken it together." With that, the shadows crawled towards me like serpentine tendrils, closing the gap between us with terrifying speed. The memories rushed in, bursting forth with grisly clarity, a runaway car screeching against gravel, screams that echoed in the night. A flash of a little facey, a swing set, laughter, and then nothing but silence. I stumbled back, real terror shattering my heart. "No. I loved you. I never wanted this," the specter laughed, a horrific sound that echoed off the walls of my disorientation. "Love? You think it matters now? You cast me aside like garbage." Suddenly, the ground beneath me vibrated as tendrils of darkness shot forth, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me toward the abyss. I fought against their grip, struggling to summon the strength to resist. "You're not real. You're part of the darkness, awaken." It was the familiar voice again, mingled within the howling winds of despair. I focused on it, desperate to grasp the last vestiges of hope it offered. With every beat of my heart, I felt the pull of my memories drained, flared, entangled in the chaos of shadows, and the chilling cries of the lost. The child's following wail cut through my thoughts like glass. "You cannot escape. We are many. We are coming for you." As the shadows tightened their grip, I saw shapes darting around us, figures enshrouded in mist, pleading and shrieking with voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony of torment that twisted my insides. "Join us, join us." they sang, forming a dreadful union that drew closer, and I fell to my knees, gasping for breath as despair clutched my throat. It wasn't just memories, they were coming back for vengeance. Out of sheer desperation, I tore at the shadows around my ankles, claws of darkness digging into my flesh. The warmth of blood pooled beneath me. In a moment of clarity, I understood there wouldn't be one memory that emerged, but a legion of them, desperate and bitter, each vying for recognition. "Help!" I roared, summoning every ounce of my humanity to pierce through the veil. "Please! I remember." "I'm sorry." To my shock, they paused, cloaked forms wavering as they seemed to contemplate my words. It was a brief moment of respite, the shrieks and chanting muting, but the child's figure lurked, eyes burning with resentment. "You only now choose to remember?" it hissed, laughter laced with malice filling the air. Then I heard a thunderous rustling in the void behind them, an old, familiar sound that brought a mix of terror and familiarity. A massive silhouette started to take shape, towering above the other spectral figures, its presence suffocating and pregnant with hopelessness. Every instinct screamed, urging me to run, but I was nailed to the ground by unseen shackles, unable to move. Awaken, awaken! The voices grew fainter but more amplified, melding into one directive, a command that swirled around, gathering force like a storm. The shadows shifted, pulling me toward the new horror, the enormous shape now penetrating the fragile shroud of light that struggled to exist in my fractured mind. As it loomed closer, I made out its face twisted with the agony of countless souls sewn into its flesh. The grief screamed from its gaping maw, a beast of nightmares, howling the stories of the forgotten who had walked these haunted grounds before me. In that moment, I came to an irrevocable conclusion. I wasn't here on accident. I was part of a cycle, one of countless souls entwined in a dance of torment. I gasped as the beast lunged forward, taking indignant aching steps toward me, shadows coiling around its limbs. "Awaken!" it growled, each word slicing through the remnants of my will until all I could do was stare into its jagged eyes, realizing too late where the darkness would lead. And then, silence fell just as it reached for me, vast wings unfurled behind it, the air thickening with despair as I braced myself for the truth that lay just within reach. The weight of the silence was suffocating as I stood frozen, the chill of dread pooling in my gut. The creature's breath, a fetid whisper of decay, wrapped around my senses, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. I felt as if I were standing at the precipice of an abyss, peering into the very depths of my soul, where darkness had claimed dominion. Its eyes bore into me, vast and hollow, reflecting a universe of sorrow and eternity marked by abandonment and rage. Do you remember now? It rasped, voice like cracking ice, jagged and sharp. You abandoned them all. You thought you could erase your misdeeds, but we are here to remind you. I could barely comprehend its words, caught in the storm of despair swirling at my feet, biting at my ankles like ravenous wolves. "Please," I croaked, my own voice trembling as I summoned the remnants of courage buried deep within me. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to save them." The beast seemed to consider my words, its elongated snout twisting into an inscrutable grimace. "You were never meant to forget. That is why we take, because forgetting is a crime worse than death." As it drew closer, an overwhelming sense of loss washed over me, drowning the remnants of resistance. The air thickened, charged with the suffering of countless souls intertwined with mine, and I grappled to stay afloat. "Awaken!" Their chorus rose again, echoing like a cacophony of shattered memories. Shadows writhed with new ferocity as the cries turned raw and primal. "We are many, and you will pay for your silence." With every syllable, the landscape twisted, and the fog treaded forward like a sentient blanket, smothering my surroundings and fraying the edges of my sanity. A larger figure lurked somewhere deeper in the darkness, its own presence dark and terrifying, threatening to materialize into a reality I didn't want to comprehend. The children flickering shadows of my past swirled around me, their forms barely visible, emerging and twisting in on themselves, morphing into ghastly versions with mouths stretched wide, filled with cries that echoed my guilt. "You let us go!" they howled, the anger pulsating from them like an incandescent flame, searing into my skin. "Stop!" I screamed, the fear bubbling up like bile in my throat. "You don't understand." But the shadows closed in tighter, inching closer to my heart, tightening their grip and surrendering me to the encroaching horror. Then I saw it, the unseen terror looming in the background, emerging from the midnight fog, a colossal maw opening like a gaping chasm, filled with an absolute darkness that consumed the light around it. I could barely comprehend its form. It was a monster built from the fear of the very souls it had consumed, stitched together in a grotesque tapestry of despair. Do you wish to know why you are here? The beast rumbled, each vibration tearing through my chest and causing my heart to race with visceral terror. "Awaken to your transgressions." Just then, the shadows lunged with a speed that made my heart plummet. I felt multiple tendrils of darkness pierce my mind, flooding me with memories I had buried. Images flickered with horrific clarity, faces of the lost, their last moments branded upon my retinas, their eyes echoing the ache of betrayal. Through the maelstrom of anguish, I glimpsed a swirling vortex of horrors I had long hidden. The night of the accident, the hapless pleas of the children clashing with my cries for help, a distorted refrain that reverberated in cruel rhythm to the beast's movements. No, I gasped. Overpowering shadows began to envelop me, each painful memory igniting a ravenous fire within, the need to escape, to break free from this cursed tableau that forced me to remember. Suddenly, a searing light broke through the suffocating darkness, illuminating the figures enveloping me, exposing their sunken eyes filled with sorrow. It was the Laketh relic of love and anguish, radiating with a warm light that countered the frigid grip of despair. Find me. A familiar voice called, threading through the chaos. Panic surged as the children's cries shifted into frantic wails, pleading for my attention even as they recoiled from the light. You have to find me to free us all. With an instinctual understanding, I reached toward the locket, my fingers brushing its cool surface as the shadows hissed in anguish. Please, don't let them take me, I begged, desperation clawing at my sanity. As the light surged through me, the shadows let loose shrieks, the beast behind me reeling as if struck, but before I could fully grasp the truth dawning within that light, I heard it, a bone-chilling sound from the depths of the void. A whisper rumbled into my ear, cold and intimate. Do you really think you can escape your past? And in that fleeting moment of clarity, as I teetered between light and dark, the ground beneath me shattered, propelling me into an abyss. The darkness swallowed my scream, echoing into oblivion, leaving an unmistakable question lingering in the air. What horrifying truth awaited beyond the veil of my own memories? The void that enveloped me felt like an eternician, oppressive silence that crushed all thoughts of escape. It was no longer just a realm of shadows, it had morphed into a graveyard of my very soul. Time had become irrelevant, as moments ceased their cruel ticking, replaced by the weight of dread pressing down heavily against my chest. I stumbled through the darkness, the elongated silhouettes of despair weaving in and out of focus like cruel mirages. I heard the whispers rising and falling around me, a symphony of agony rising through the thick air. You are one of us now. You are forever lost, they echoed within me, scraping at my mind, desperately pleading for acknowledgement, as if they believed I had power over their fate, power I knew I lacked. Yet, there she was, the woman, the spectral figure from before. Her form flickered like a dying flame, the urgency in her solemn eyes compelling me to follow. You can break the cycle, she urged, her voice barely a whisper. But you have to face them first. Instinctively, I hesitated, heart pounding in my chest as doubt consumed me once more. What more did I need to face? What further horrors awaited? But before I could second-guess myself, tendrils of darkness slithered closer, wrapping around my wrists as if inviting me back into their suffocating embrace. Join us, they hissed. No. I won't allow you to take me again. The defiance rose within me, a flicker igniting against the rising tide of despair. I took a step forward, determined to confront whatever nightmare lay ahead. The shadows parted as if sensing my resolve, revealing a desolate landscape, a nightmarish tableau that gnawed at my core. I stood at the edge of a clearing, a ghostly replica of the childhood playground from my memories, the swing set swaying unnaturally in an unseen wind. The air had turned frigid, curled with the scent of rot and despair. Each swing echoed eerie cries that pierced the heart, and then I saw the children. Shadows flickered from behind the surreal playground, distorted reflections of innocence mewling for help. They reached out for me, mouths moving silently, each face a haunting reminder of lives extinguished too soon. Daddy! The figures called in tones that resonated with longing and betrayal. Guilt crashed over me like a wave. I sank to my knees, hands pressed against dirt that felt wrong, corrupt. The swing creaked eerily, echoing laughter stained with sorrow. I am so sorry. I shouted desperately, a plea to the darkness, to the memories that refused to recede. I didn't know how to save you. Suddenly, the shadows writhing around me surged forward, pulsing with rage and anguish, their whispered reproaches mingling around my ears like a terrible storm. "You left us." They screamed, their voices echoing the agony of abandonment. Suddenly, the clearing erupted. The laughing children morphed grotesquely, filling the air with the cacophony of shattered dreams. Isolation hung like a thick veil, smothering any sense of hope. I staggered back, fear gripping my throat. "No, please. I never wanted to forget, then awaken." The silhouettes screamed in unison, fingers stretching out to ensnare me. "Awaken to the truth you thought buried." In that desperate second, the ground roared, and from its depths, a twisting maw unfurled, a gaping abyss eager to swallow me whole. "You cannot escape your fate." The beast rumbled, its voice a chilling echo of familiarity. My memories swirled around me, a kaleidoscope of bliss turned to torment, and within the shadows lurked a new figure, mouth twisted into a grin that promised horrors yet undreamed. With a single flick of its arm, the shadows closed in. "Join us. Embrace the darkness," they cried, wailing a predatory chant that threatened to drown me. No. I want, but their hands took hold, ripping at the edges of my sanity, pulling me toward that cavernous mouth, the light around me dissipating like mist. Every ounce of strength fought to resist. "I loved you," I screamed into that vast emptiness, but their cries for vengeance drowned my sorrow, echoing the truths of my past. The very moment when I had relinquished my role as protector, a blinding flash erupted, and everything shattered. I was thrown into the depths of remembrance, memories cascading forth, flashes of laughter mingled with silenced screams, light twisted with inky shadows. "Help us," they pleaded, echoes of their cries melding into a single voice that resonated with a power I could not ignore me own. Reality swirled around me as tendrils of light surged from my palms. "I will not abandon you," I yelled as the shadows recoiled, crumbling backward under the weight of my intent. "I will end this cycle." The light burst forth, scattering the darkness, illuminating the faces I knew too well, those lost in time, forcing me to confront the truth I had tried so hard to suppress. "I will find you," I screamed. But as soon as the shadows absorbed my light, they surged forward, enveloping me once more in despair. The darkness shrieked in laughter, echoing through the vast unknown. "You will never escape. You will always belong to us." And then, just as that crushing despair began to close in, I felt warmth flare within me, a memory, a truth long buried. "No more. I must awaken the truth," I roared, gathering every bit of strength I possessed. The pulse of the void quieted, the creature recoiled, revealing a sinking realization: the shadows were afraid. I was no longer the helpless victim, I was the architect of my fate. "Awaken," I shouted one last time, both a command and a plea. The tendrils of darkness shrieked, morphing under the glow of memories reclaimed, but then came the terrifying awareness. The face of the last figure, the very semblance of guilt wrapped in shadows and malice, spoke in my own voice, echoing from deep within. "You opened the door. Now it's time to seal it forever. You cannot awaken without sacrifice." And with that, a haunting laughter rolled through the air, sending chills spiraling into my bones. I gasped, an icy grip seizing my heart. Had I truly opened a door I couldn't close? I closed my eyes against the rising tide of shadows, letting the chilling wind envelop me. I welcomed their grasp and whispered a single word: "Awaken." The laughter fell silent, swallowed by the void, and then I understood the horrifying truth: the shadows were just the beginning. I opened my eyes to the strangest sight: a darkened forest around me, a twisted reflection of the haunted grounds long left unchecked, and the door still ajar, whispering promises of horrors yet to come, revealing the final unsealing of the dark truths I had so desperately tried to escape. As I stood there, frozen in the haze, the ground trembled beneath me, shadows shifting with a will of their own. A single thought flashed like a beacon through the encroaching darkness, curling around the edges of my consciousness: it would never truly be over. The darkness lingered and awaited, for the abyss had no end. It lived in the echoes of my choices, in the weight of the memories, and in every pleading whisper of the lost souls who called for me still: "Welcome home." The final truth reverberated through the forest, chilling my blood: darkness would always rise, for it thrived in the heart of those unprepared to face their past.